They had no idea betraying you would ruin their life. They thought they could betray you and walk away untouched. They had no idea that turning their back on you would set fire to everything they once held dear. See, some people play with loyalty like it's a game, thinking they can cross you and still keep the benefits of your presence. But what they didn't understand was this: you weren't just another person in their life. You were the blessing, the covering, the silent force that kept things together. And the moment they betrayed you, they opened the door to consequences they couldn't control. What they thought was just a choice became the very reason their life began to unravel. Because when someone betrays someone chosen, favored, and protected, they're not just walking away from a person. They're walking away from the grace that kept them. And now, they're learning the hard way. Betrayal isn't just a wound, it's a mirror. They never realized that the moment they betrayed you, they weren't hurting you, they were revealing themselves. See, betrayal doesn't begin with a blade in the back, it starts with a shift in the spirit, a coldness in their eyes, a silence when you needed their voice, a laugh behind your back when you needed their loyalty. That's not just hurt, that's exposure. When someone betrays you, they think they're dealing damage to your heart. They think they've broken something in you that you'll never recover from. But in reality, all they've done is shine a light on the weakness in their soul. Betrayal is a mirror, and when they turned it on you, they thought you'd be the one caught in shame. But no, what they saw staring back at them was their own reflection, drenched in fear, insecurity, envy, and guilt. People think betrayal is about power, like they've gained the upper hand. But what they don't see is that true strength doesn't come from hurting others. It comes from staying solid when others try to tear you down. When they lied on your name, when they whispered behind your back, when they sold out your trust for their convenience, they were banking on your breakdown. They didn't realize they were handing you the evidence, the proof, the receipts of their own downfall. You didn't even have to fight back. Life has a way of letting betrayal do all the talking. While you were crying in silence, God was writing the story. While they were bragging about how they played you, heaven was setting the stage for their exposure. Because betrayal isn't just a sin against another person, it's a boomerang. What you throw out with deception, you get back with destruction. You see, when people betray someone like you, someone who was loyal, who showed up, who kept secrets, who prayed for them, who defended them when they weren't even in the room, they're not just crossing a line. They're cutting off their own lifeline. They think they're pushing you down, but they're actually pulling themselves into a storm. Because what they fail to understand is you weren't just in their life for decoration. You were there as a covering, a blessing, a divine connection. You were the one that kept peace in chaos, the one who carried their burdens when no one else even noticed they were struggling. You were the one who saw their pain and chose to stay when others walked out. And when they betrayed that, when they threw that kind of presence away like it was nothing, they thought it would bring them freedom, but instead, it brought them ruin. Now they walk around haunted by the very decision they thought would elevate them. They thought losing you was a win, but life doesn't play by those rules. Now they're dealing with the silence they created, the loneliness they asked for, the instability that came the moment your presence exited their life. And the worst part? They can't even blame you, because deep down, they know you never switched up. You never moved dirty. You never gave less than your all. It was their own reflection in that mirror of betrayal that sentenced them. They betrayed you, thinking you'd fall, but all that fell was the mask they wore to hide their true intentions. And here's what makes it even more powerful. You didn't have to lift a single hand. You didn't have to clap back, expose them, or sink to their level. You let your silence speak, and that silence became the loudest consequence they've ever heard. Because when someone looks in the mirror and realizes they betrayed the one person who had their back without conditions, it hits different. It doesn't just bruise the ego, it crushes the spirit. They now live in a reality where your name reminds them of everything they lost. Not because you shouted it, but because your growth, your peace, your progress is doing all the shouting for you. So don't carry the wound like it's your shame, carry it like your proof. The fact that you survived it without losing your integrity is a testimony all by itself. You didn't let it make you bitter, you let it make you wiser. You didn't let it break your faith, you let it refine it. They thought betrayal was your ending, but really, it was your rebirth. It was the moment the mirror turned and showed you who they really were. And in that moment, you were set free. You were released from connections that couldn't hold your future, from relationships that were never rooted in truth, from environments that couldn't handle your purpose. They thought they ruined you, but now they see they only ruined their access to you. And as they sit in the wreckage of their own deception, they're finally facing the truth they tried to run from. That betraying you didn't just cost them a relationship, it cost them favor, it cost them protection, it cost them peace. And that price is far heavier than they ever imagined. God doesn't let his children stay broken. They broke you, yes, but they never understood that breaking you wouldn't keep you broken. They thought that betrayal would bury you, that the weight of their deception would keep you down, silenced, forgotten. But what they didn't count on was the God who was standing over your life, watching every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you stayed silent when you could have retaliated. They had no idea that the same God who allowed the betrayal would also be the one who raised you from the rubble. Because God never lets his children stay broken. Not when their heart was pure, not when their hands were clean, not when their love was real. You see, while they were plotting, God was planning. While they were celebrating your fall, God was preparing your rise. And what they thought was your ending was really your transformation. There's something divine about being broken and still breathing. Something powerful about being shattered by people you trusted and yet refusing to let the bitterness take root. You felt the sting. You felt the loss. You even questioned your worth for a moment. But what they didn't know is that your healing wasn't in their hands. Your comeback wasn't in their control. Your restoration was already scheduled by heaven. So while they walked away thinking they left you in pieces, God was picking those pieces up one by one and rebuilding you in silence. And when God rebuilds you, he doesn't use the same fragile foundation. He fortifies your spirit, renews your mind, and elevates your vision. What broke you before can't touch you now. They don't even recognize the version of you that God restored. They see you smiling again, rising again, glowing again, and it disturbs their spirit because they swore you'd be nothing without them. They thought their betrayal would define you, but what they failed to understand is that it was actually the betrayal that refined you. It was the fire that burned away your self-doubt, your need for validation, your willingness to shrink yourself just to be accepted. God used the pain they caused to build your backbone, sharpen your discernment, and teach you how to love yourself the way you were loving everyone else. You came out of that storm with more strength, more wisdom, and more clarity than you've ever had before. And now they're the ones struggling with the aftermath. See, when you're favored by God, your healing becomes their confusion. They don't understand how you're still standing. They don't understand how you didn't break down completely. They don't understand how peace still lives in your home, how purpose still moves in your steps, how joy still dances in your soul. But the truth is, you made it through, because God doesn't let his chosen ones stay down for long. He may allow the fall, but he never leaves you there. He may allow the betrayal, but only to remove the people who were secretly draining your destiny. And now you see it clearly. You see that what you thought was a loss was really a divine redirection. Don't ever doubt the strength that comes from surviving betrayal with your faith intact. You didn't just get up, you grew. You didn't just move on, you matured. And while they're still stuck in cycles of confusion and emptiness, you're stepping into a life that's covered in grace. You're not just healed, you're elevated. And that elevation didn't come because you fought back. It came because you let God handle what was too heavy for you to carry. You let him deal with the betrayal while you stayed obedient, stayed focused, stayed humble. And that humility, that quiet surrender, that's what God rewarded. He saw you choose peace over revenge. He saw you pray instead of curse. He saw you walk away instead of clinging to people who no longer deserved access to your life. Now they sit in rooms where your name is mentioned and it burns them. Not because you wronged them, but because they wronged the very person who only wanted to see them win. They betrayed the one who held them down, who saw the best in them, who covered their flaws and loved them anyway. And that kind of betrayal, that kind of loss, it comes back to haunt them in ways you'll never see. Because while you're walking in healing, they're walking in guilt. While you're covered in peace, they're covered in confusion. While you're building with God, they're crumbling under the weight of their own decisions. So keep walking, keep healing, keep shining. Don't look back for closure. Your growth is the closure. Your peace is the revenge. Your glow is the answer to every lie they told. And let this be your truth. God doesn't let his children stay broken. He lifts, he restores, and he makes sure the same people who tried to destroy you get a front row seat to your elevation. They had no idea what they were setting in motion when they betrayed you. But now the story is writing itself, and you're still the one standing, favored, healed, and unstoppable. You were the blessing they mishandled. They mishandled you, thinking you were replaceable. They treated your loyalty like a convenience and your love like a transaction. They thought they could come and go from your life, take and take without ever pouring back into you, and that somehow you'd always be there, waiting, hoping, forgiving, staying. What they failed to realize is that you weren't just another person in their story, you were the blessing. You were the one thing holding back the chaos in their life. You were the calm in their storm, the voice of reason in their confusion, the safe place in a world that constantly disappointed them. And the moment they betrayed you, they didn't just lose a relationship, they lost divine protection. They lost favor. They lost the presence of someone who truly saw them and still chose to stand beside them. They mishandled the very thing that was elevating their life, and now they're living in the ruins of that mistake. People get so comfortable with good people, thinking kindness is weakness and forgiveness is foolishness. They don't understand that when someone genuinely loves you, supports you, believes in you, that's not ordinary, that's sacred. But they took your sacred presence and played with it like it was disposable. They leaned on you when they were broken, but disappeared when you were the one bleeding. They used your words when they needed strength, but disrespected your silence when you were at your lowest. They laughed with you in public, but doubted you in private. And through all that, you still gave, you still poured, you still showed up. Because your heart was never built on conditions. It was built on character. But there comes a time when the giver walks away, and when the giver walks, something shifts. Because the blessing isn't just what you did, it was who you were. Now they're discovering that you weren't just a chapter, they were living in a whole season of grace because of your presence. You were the reason certain storms didn't destroy them. You were the reason they had clarity when they were confused, hope when they were hopeless. You stood in the gap for them when no one else even knew there was a gap. And when they betrayed that, when they traded truth for temptation, loyalty for ego, love for lust, They didn't just hurt you, they cursed themselves, because betrayal of a blessing has consequences. And now those consequences are catching up to them. What once came easy is now full of struggle. What once felt peaceful is now filled with restlessness. They walked away thinking they'd find better, only to realize better was already in their hands. You were the one praying for them behind the scenes, the one holding their secrets, the one encouraging their dreams when they couldn't even see their own potential. You were the glue in places they didn't even know were breaking, but they couldn't see it, or maybe they did, and their pride refused to admit it. Maybe it was easier for them to act like you didn't matter, because to acknowledge your worth meant confronting their own inadequacy. So instead, they chose betrayal. They chose deception. They chose to hurt the one person who only wanted to see them win. And now they feel the absence of everything they once took for granted. Not just your voice, not just your energy, but the peace that followed you everywhere you went. They're learning now that blessings don't beg, they don't chase, they don't force themselves into places where they're not honored. A true blessing walks with grace, but leaves with power. And when you left, everything changed. The atmosphere shifted. The clarity vanished. The chaos returned. Because you were the light, and they chose to live in the dark. They gambled with something priceless, and now they're paying in pain. They thought you'd be easy to replace, but they can't even find your shadow in the crowd. They can't recreate the energy you brought, the wisdom you offered, the strength you stood in. And the more they search, the more they realize they lost the best thing that ever happened to them. But don't you dare regret being the blessing. Don't shrink your value because they couldn't see it. Don't let their betrayal define your worth. You were real in a world full of fake. You were consistent in a world full of convenience. And just because they failed to honor that doesn't mean you weren't divine. Their inability to receive you was never a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their brokenness. You were the mirror they couldn't face, the standard they couldn't meet, the light they weren't ready to follow. So, instead of rising, they ran. Instead of growing, they betrayed. And now they sit in the silence of that choice, haunted by the blessing they let slip away. Let that be your peace. Let that be your closure. You were the blessing they mishandled, and now they're learning what life looks like without it. Not because you wished harm on them, but because favor doesn't stay where it's not respected. God removes his vassals from places that no longer deserve them. And when he removed you, he wasn't punishing you, he was protecting you. He was elevating you, and now your presence will be their lesson. Because some people don't realize what they had until grace is gone, and when the blessing walks away, everything they thought they controlled begins to fall apart. They had no idea betraying you would ruin their life, but now they're living in the very consequences they created. Your absence became the storm they never saw coming. They never imagined that your silence would echo louder than any argument. They never thought your absence would shake the very foundation they stood on. When they betrayed you, they thought it would be just another scar on your heart, something you'd eventually get over, something they could explain away, something they could come back from. But what they failed to understand was that your presence wasn't just filling space in their life. It was holding things together. And the day you walked away wasn't just the end of a connection. It was the beginning of a collapse. Because your absence wasn't empty, it was weighty. It carried a divine authority they took for granted. And the moment they lost that presence, the ground beneath them started to shift. Doors that once opened easily started closing. Peace that once came naturally turned into chaos. Clarity they used to find in your voice turned into confusion. Your absence became the storm they never saw coming. See, they got used to your loyalty. They got comfortable with your consistency. You were the one they vented to, leaned on, laughed with, prayed with. You were their anchor. And they thought, anchors don't move. They assumed you'd always be there, no matter how many times they pushed you to the edge, no matter how deeply they cut you, no matter how carelessly they treated your love. But even the strongest anchor lets go when the weight becomes disrespect. Even the most patient soul gets tired of being taken for granted. You didn't leave out of spite, you left out of survival. And when you left, they realized the real storm wasn't your presence, it was your absence, because you were the covering they never thanked. You were the light they dimmed. You were the miracle they misused. And when God removed you from the equation, it exposed the truth they had been hiding from. You were never the problem. You were the protection. The real consequence of betrayal isn't what happens to the betrayed, it's what happens to the betrayer. They believed they were in control when they lied, when they manipulated, when they played both sides. But betrayal is a seed, and every seed bears fruit. They planted dishonor, and now they're harvesting confusion. They watered deception, and now they're reaping regret. And the most painful part? It didn't hit all at once. No, it came gradually, slowly, like a rising tide that drowns a man who never saw the ocean creeping in. At first, they felt free, thought they had made the right choice, thought they had upgraded. But little by little, things started to shift. That joy turned to restlessness. That confidence turned to doubt. That peace turned to paranoia. Because when someone betrays a good soul, they don't just lose a person. They lose God's hand that was on that connection. And you didn't have to say a word. You didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to post a cryptic message. Didn't have to explain your side. Your growth became the response. Your peace became the proof. Your elevation became the answer. Because the best revenge has never been revenge at all. It's the glow that follows healing. It's the light that comes from walking away with dignity. And while they were hoping you'd fall apart without them, they never expected you'd rise. They never thought the one they betrayed would be the one they'd look up to. But now they watch from the outside, longing for the peace they once had access to, missing the prayers they used to receive, yearning for the energy they once consumed without appreciation. They're trying to fill a void they created. But here's the truth. You can't replace a blessing with a substitute. You can't find peace in chaos. You can't recover something you never respected. You were never too much. You were just too real for their comfort. You brought truth to a space built on lies, depth to a heart stuck in the shallow. And when you left, that truth stayed behind like a mirror they can't escape. Now they sit with the reality of what they did, trying to smile through the guilt, trying to rebuild on broken foundations, trying to find in others what only you carried. But favor doesn't duplicate, presence doesn't clone. The oil you carried can't be mimicked. It was yours, poured by God, forged through fire, protected by purpose. And they had it. They had access. They had your best, and they let it go. But don't think for a moment that any of this is about ego or revenge. This is about justice. This is about divine order. You didn't ask for their downfall. You just walked away from being their shield. And the moment you stopped covering them, the winds began to howl. Because God had only kept the storm back for your sake. He only held things in place because you were present. And now that you're gone, the storm is doing what storms do, clearing out what was built on falsehood, exposing everything they tried to keep hidden, stripping away every mask they wore. They thought they could dance with deception and never get caught in the rain, but you were the umbrella. And now that you've left, they're drenched in the consequences of their own choices. So let them feel it. Let them sit in it. Not out of cruelty, but because healing requires truth. And the truth is, They underestimated you. They misunderstood you. They mishandled you. But most of all, they misjudged the impact your absence would have. They didn't know you were the blessing. They didn't know your silence would roar. They didn't know your exit would unravel everything they'd built on your presence. But now they know. Now they're learning. Now they're remembering you, not as a mistake, not as a moment, but as the turning point they never saw coming. Because your absence didn't just change their world, it exposed it. And the storm that followed wasn't punishment. It was a wake-up call. So stand tall, keep healing, keep shining, because the storm they're facing is not your burden to carry. It's the price of betrayal. And the beauty is, you didn't lose, you were released. God used their betrayal to clear your path, to elevate your purpose, and to prepare a place for you where your presence will be honored, not exploited, where your light will be embraced, not dimmed, where your heart will be protected, not pierced. And as for those who betrayed you, let the silence be your final word, and your growth be the loudest sound they ever hear. They had no idea betraying you would ruin their life, but now your absence has said everything they refused to hear when you were still present. God doesn't let betrayal go unanswered. There's something sacred about being chosen by God, something powerful about walking in purpose, even when the people around you don't understand the weight of your calling. When someone betrays a soul that is walking in alignment with heaven, they're not just wounding a person. They're standing in opposition to a divine plan. And God doesn't turn a blind eye to that. He sees every silent tear, every sleepless night, every moment you held your peace instead of clapping back. He watched as they smiled in your face and stabbed you in the back. He witnessed the manipulation, the lies, the way they twisted the narrative to make themselves feel justified. And while they thought they got away with it, God was just getting started. Because betrayal may look like a personal attack on the surface, but to God it's a spiritual violation. And when His chosen are betrayed, heaven responds, not with vengeance fueled by ego, but with justice rooted in truth. God doesn't let betrayal go unanswered, not because He's petty, but because He is righteous. When they betrayed you, they thought it was just a moment, a decision, a way to serve their selfishness, but they had no clue what they were truly doing. They weren't just betraying a relationship, they were interfering with an assignment. You carried purpose. You carried anointing. You carried breakthrough for others in your words, your presence, your spirit. And when they tried to tear you down, they were standing against what heaven had put in place. That's dangerous ground. See, people think they can disrespect chosen vessels and move on with life as usual. But there are consequences when you touch what God has covered. It may not come immediately. It may not come in public, but it always comes, because the God who lifts you will also defend you. He will allow you to endure the pain in silence, but He will answer it in power. And when He responds, it's not to destroy, it's to restore, to reveal, to realign. Some of the hardest moments in life are when you're doing everything right, walking in love, extending grace, serving with sincerity, and you still get hurt by the very people you supported. That's the kind of betrayal that cuts deep. But even in those moments, God is working. He's not blind to your suffering. He's not deaf to your prayers. And He's not late to respond. He's strategic. He lets the betrayal happen, not to break you, but to expose what you were too loyal to see. He'll let them play their part, lie with boldness, walk away with pride, only to eventually uncover everything they tried to keep hidden. And when the truth comes out, it won't be because you fought back, it'll be because God revealed it. That's the difference. You don't have to avenge yourself when you serve the one who sits high and sees all. Betrayal often feels like a setback, but in the kingdom of God, it's a setup for elevation. What was meant to break you becomes the very thing God uses to bless you. The people who walked away didn't derail your destiny, they revealed it. They exposed the limitations of their loyalty so God could lead you to greater. And make no mistake, God takes betrayal personally when it involves His child. That's why you've seen people fall from favor after hurting you. That's why some of them can't find peace no matter how far they run. It's not a curse, it's consequence. It's not your doing, it's God's justice. Because when He puts His hand on someone's life and others try to tear them down, He doesn't stay silent forever. He speaks through outcomes. He speaks through divine reversal. He speaks through tables being prepared in the presence of enemies. You didn't lose in the betrayal, you were released. You were removed from people and places that were never equipped to carry the weight of your calling. Their betrayal didn't block your blessing, it unlocked it. And now they watch from the sidelines, wondering how you're still standing, still smiling, still elevating. What they don't realize is, when God is for you, betrayal becomes a bridge, not a burial. He'll take what was meant to destroy you and use it to strengthen you. He'll take every false word spoken about you and make it the reason people speak your name in rooms you've never stepped in. That's the justice of God. Quiet, strategic, unmistakable. He doesn't just restore you, He vindicates you. Let them talk. Let them pretend. Let them live in the delusion that they didn't lose anything when they lost you. Because in time, the truth always surfaces. And when it does, they'll have to face the reality that they betrayed a blessing, that they mishandled someone God had His hand on, that while they were scheming and slandering, God was documenting, He was watching. And now He's moving, not because you begged Him to, but because He promised to be your defender. That's the kind of God you serve. One who doesn't just heal the wound, but honors the pain. One who takes your scars and turns them into signs of strength. One who lets you walk away in silence while He orchestrates their reckoning. So don't seek revenge. Don't fight for explanations. Don't waste your energy trying to convince people of the truth. Your life will speak for you. Your elevation will answer every lie. Your peace will contradict every false story. And God? He'll make sure they see it. Not so you can gloat, but so they can witness what favor looks like. What happens when someone keeps their heart pure despite the betrayal? What happens when you choose to let God handle what was meant to crush you? Because when you place your pain in His hands, He turns it into power. And while they deal with the chaos their choices created, you'll walk in the clarity that only comes from trusting God with the fallout. Let that be your focus, not the betrayal, but the blessing, not the pain, but the promotion. Because every time someone betrays a child of God, heaven takes note. And when heaven moves, it shakes things up. God doesn't forget, He doesn't overlook, and He doesn't lose battles. Your silence was not weakness, it was wisdom. Your walk away wasn't defeat, it was wisdom. Your walk away wasn't defeat, it was divine timing. And their downfall? That's not your victory, it's God's justice being fulfilled. They had no idea that betraying you would ruin their life, not because you wished it, but because they stepped out of alignment with what God was trying to bless them through. And now, what they broke in pride, they must watch be built in your favor. Let that be the final word.